Good afternoon and welcome back to Real Estate Live UK. For anyone that's tuning in to their first session as part of Real Estate Live, this event takes place 3 times a year in February, June and October. And the week of free to attend virtual events is brought to you by White Label, our partners and sponsors, and a big thank you to all the organisations that have contributed to the fantastic week we've been having so far. During the sessions, places from across the UK are showcasing investment opportunities, and we've been talking about topical issues related to place and property. And if you're interested in having a look at any of the other sessions, they're recorded so you can watch them back, and we have a few more sessions taking place tomorrow, so you can see those on our website, and I'll also tell you some more about what's coming up tomorrow at the end of this session. The session that's about to begin is about the role that the music industry and music has in regeneration and supporting vibrant communities, and I think it's going to be a fantastic panel. And thank you very much to Vicarage Field and Sound Diplomacy for helping to bring this session to Real Estate Live. Before we begin, I'd just like to remind the audience that we'd like your participation and we're very keen to hear your questions, so please feel free to ask them in Zoom's Q&A feature. And now I'm really pleased to hand over to the chair for this conversation, Jett, who is the head of UK at Sound Diplomacy. Jett, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us to what I think is going to be a very exciting webinar. We've got some great presentations as well. So, as was just mentioned, the title of this webinar is "What Role Does Music Have in Regeneration and Supporting Vibrant Communities?" So in this, we'll be exploring the role of music in supporting regeneration across diverse landscapes and scale, including local authority and town centre repurposing plans, with a particular focus on the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. Post-COVID and perhaps post-retail, most UK town centres will be repositioning and repurposing over the coming decade. Music is a powerful tool at the heart of the cultural and nighttime economy. With music, we are able to engage with communities, create vibrant and welcoming places, drive entrepreneurialism, and attract and retain talent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly introduce my guests. We're going to have two presentations, and then we're going to go into a webinar and a Q&A, and hopefully some time for some questions at the end. So on this webinar, I am joined by David West. David West is the founding partner of Studio Egret West since 2004. He is known for his enthusiastic, persuasive leadership skills and abilities as a strategic thinker, lateral thinker to create ambitious narratives for complex, multifaceted projects. God, that was a long sentence, sorry. David leads several of the practice's most influential regeneration projects, including Earls Court, Smithfield Market, Digbeth, the Old Vinyl Factory in Hayes, and Mayfield in Manchester. David is a design advocate for the Mayor of London. David's actually going to be doing one of our first presentations, so we're looking forward to that. Joining us as well is Hannah Briley. Hannah Briley is the Managing Director of the Make It Group. Make It Group are a workspace provider bringing colour, enterprise and social value to London's underused spaces alongside community and creative industries. Make It London are set to reimagine Barking's Roycroft House in 2022 by refurbishing a 45,000 square foot building into a hybrid workspace and cultural destination in the town centre. Prior to joining Make It Group, Hannah was the manager of Pop Brixton and head of music for Oval Space. Peter is quite long, this bit. Peter is a post-retail expert and strategic advisor across £200 million portfolio. He's the lead on Vicarage Field. His approach to integrating wider music ecosystems in urban regeneration has been quoted as the best practice in the Mayor's Rescue Plan. He also holds non-executive roles at places such as the Rattle, a community incubator for inventors, hackers and artists. And finally, we've got Anne-Marie Peña, who's head of culture at the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. Anne-Marie oversees an ambitious programme of socially engaged arts-based programming commissions with both community organisation and external partners, including the Tate, the Serpentine Gallery and the London Jazz Festival. Anne-Marie was formerly a director of Frisk Street Gallery in London and was a lecturer of visual studies at the University of Arts, London. What I'm going to do now is hand over to David West, who's going to give a presentation just offline. We were trying to get it to work and it didn't quite get there. So we're all as excited as he is to see if this works. David, are you...
Can you hear me? Okay, that's a good start. Thanks, Jett. I will try and share content right now. Start broadcast. The beauty of iPads, is it going to be strong enough? Let's hope. And can you see that?
Yeah.
You can. That's great news.
Over to you, Robert.
Okay, so I've been given 8 minutes to answer the question of what role does music have in regeneration and supporting vibrant communities. I would hope that that's now saying, and the beat goes on, which would be the title of where I'd like to talk about for those 8 minutes. I've chosen a few key projects for our studio that I think have been absolutely driven by music. And I think I'll start with the Old Vinyl Factory. The Old Vinyl Factory is out in Hayes. It was formerly an extraordinary place called His Master's Voice. And we have, with a company called UNI as our development partner, been transforming this amazing place, which has got a huge history as the Gramophone Factory, then EMI, then His Master's Voice. And there previously was a very average kind of approach to this site. And with UNI, we sort of dug into the kind of the full history and narrative of this place, which was all about music. And what's really exciting about the project is that we are able to work in this completely immersive way with all sorts of people to celebrate its story so far, even down to actually specifying a giant dog, which was the sort of symbol of the Gramophone Factory. We worked hard to create new recording studios, new music on the site as we actually sort of moved through the application. We even actually managed to recreate the original gramophone forms of this place with local manufacturers and makers who remember its previous siting. We transformed what would have been an average car park into the music box and purchased an image of screaming Beatlemania fans to completely transform what would otherwise been a very, very average car park. There's the dog. There's some of the kind of the public spaces coming to fruition. And what we found is that the beat really does go on here, in that actually we've managed to actually create a whole new music academy here on site as part of the project. When we think about another project in Digbeth, which is at the heart of Birmingham, I can't help but remember being a very sweaty 17-year-old who was super delighted back in 1991 to go and see Primal Scream way before they were so well-known and globally recognised band. And I went for the first time to Digbeth in Birmingham, which didn't mean very much to me at the time. And I literally spent the whole night, because I hadn't worked out how to get home at that tender age, actually in Digbeth. And it's exciting to me that then 30 years later, literally just around the corner from the Birmingham Institute, as it then was, a client of ours called Oval Group have managed to pull together an array of different sites into one coherent framework plan that we've been leading. And it's really exciting to me to see that the Maid Festival, for example, and numerous other venues within Digbeth still have music at the heart of this community, this enterprising industrious community. And our vision for Digbeth does in no way undermine that. It says, yes, please, let's turn the beats up. And it's a full energy, full agenda kind of environment, multi-leveled, multi-layered offering. And crucially, in the middle of it, atop a kind of a new polyvalent car park, we are creating a new venue, the arena, which will actually connect in the place of the Maid Festival through to a new viaduct park on top of what is called the Duddeston Viaduct. And it's really exciting to me to go back, like literally 30 years later, and give back to the city the vibe that I enjoyed when I was 17, that made so much to me. So I suppose in that mode, equally excited in Manchester to be hanging out in Mayfield. I grew up a lot in Manchester. I went to university in Manchester, and I was super lucky to be there 91, 92 to 96. So I was part of the Hacienda generation. I did get to see all of the big bands from The Verve to Oasis, Blur, the whole lot of massive gigs. I did frequent all sorts of pretty amazing environments, Hacienda, Freedom to Party, Paradise Factory, etc. And for me, that was incredibly soulful and incredibly important part of my journey and the journey of the city. So when we were tasked to transform in a competitive situation, the Mayfield site, which is wide turn left at Manchester Piccadilly, we were gobsmacked to discover that this huge building, the Mayfield Depot, was due for demolition. And we stood up for it. We said, don't demolish this thing. It's utterly beautiful. We can't believe you would do a master plan with it. And gobsmackingly, we were the only people that said, don't knock it down. And we were really happy to win the competition, again, with our development partner, you and I, to transform this place, music-led Regeneration, into a completely, utterly extraordinary venue, working very closely alongside the Vibration Group at Broadwick, and This Must Be the Place, alongside you and I, to transform this into a 10,000 person venue. And boy, there's been some amazing events there. And inspired by the Smiths, amid concrete and clay and general decay, nature must still find a way. So ignore all the codes of the day, the obvious, knock it down for clean cosmetic blocks. Let your juvenile impulses sway. There's still a lot of juvenile in me. And here you see the Depot Mayfield come alive for Pride. And here you see a completely and utterly new park, the first park in 100 years for Manchester, that will allow all of those uses to completely expand from flexible halls of this transformed building that literally become the foundation for a much bigger, bolder place than ever imagined before in Manchester. Which brings me to London again, another field, Smithfield, where we see the transformation of the heart of the city, the old meat market, which itself is deeply connected deep down to fabric, to kind of the nightclub environment, to Oriole Jazz Club, to the amazing kind of audiences that can be hosted in these spaces. And here we are seeing, in the advent of the meat markets moving to Barking and Dagenham, segue coming soon, Peter, the Barking and Dagenham, you have this opportunity to transform this into a truly 24/7 piece of city. And yes, nightclubs are acceptable, please, as is music. So we have halls, venues, upstairs, downstairs, in these utterly transformed structures that will hopefully see a completely new life, a completely new generation of people enjoying the spaces.
You might want to stop that phone call.
Is it Aidan the plumber or Aidan plumber? If it's the plumber, I might need to take it.
We might have lost him due to that phone call, and I hope it's not a bad leak or something like that. We're going to wait. I'm just going to wait 1 minute just to see if he comes back. But I mean, first of all, what David's been saying is truly exciting for Birmingham, and obviously the work that they've been doing with you and I, which Sound Diplomacy worked with before. We absolutely love what those guys do. Is really exciting in Manchester as well. And of course, I did notice on the flyer that you had, oh, here he is. I did notice on the flyer you had Andrew Weatherall on the lineup as well, who was a particular favourite DJ of mine. David, was there much more of that? Or
no, I was pretty much saying it was my segue to Barking. And Peter's amazing, ambitious plans to transform a monocultural shopping centre with music at the beating heart of it. Unfortunately, my internet just cut out at that exact moment. But I'm pretty much done.
Cool. Thanks very much, David. I think I did do a little segue myself, but if it's okay, I'll hand over now to
carry on.
Anne-Marie for your presentation, if that's all right.
Sure. Hi, everyone. As said before, I'm Anne-Marie Peña, and I am head of culture at Barking and Dagenham. I'm just trying to buy myself some time as I try to share just really quickly.
Hopefully you'll be more successful than I was, Anne-Marie.
Let's see. Am I doing this? Yep. So I'm going to focus on, my question was to see how music can support regeneration, particularly in Barking and Dagenham. I don't know how much people on this call know about Barking and Dagenham. It's an incredibly exciting place at the moment. There's a lot of investment happening across the borough. But this year marks the centenary of the world's largest estate when it was built, and according to some measurements, still the world's largest estate, the Becontree estate, that's built in Dagenham. Some really significant people have come from there. I actually just came from some plaque unveilings for Alf Ramsey, who coached, 1966 World Cup hero football team. But basically what we're doing is trying to build a sense of community across an estate that's been ravaged by lots of issues, including Dagenham Ford, fundamentally, basically almost completely moving out of the neighborhood, and other kind of social and economic pressures that have hit the community there. So to commemorate 100 years of this estate and the community and the achievements of the people there, we decided to run a music festival, which seems slightly bonkers at a time when we were hit by a global pandemic, but we decided to forge ahead, and we partnered with Love Music, Hate Racism. Particularly because we're at a crossroads. So about 11 years ago, there was quite a right-wing leadership of the local council, the BNP, and a lot has changed since then. And we wanted to celebrate how much we've changed over the past decade. So we decided to partner with Love Music, Hate Racism, who we have a long history of working with, to develop what we called the Becontree 100 Festival. The idea was to bring along the community as much as possible in all the decision-making that happened with the festival. We established a steering group that combined local cultural partners in the borough, as well as local residents, some individual artists, some musicians, and together came up with a lineup. We often relied on Love Music's Rolodex, and what we achieved was pretty significant, particularly during COVID, meeting online, etc. One thing I wanted to point out is that we are a borough of radically low participation in the UK, and that's something that part of my job, my colleagues at the council and other partners in the borough are trying to work on. So to give a sense of scale, normally for the public programs that we ourselves initiate, we have about 14 to 15,000 people participate. And what I'm really excited about is that this August, when we ran this festival weekend, we had over 18,000 people come to the festival, which was a huge achievement. And I think a real sign that after COVID, everyone's, I'm putting a very positive spin on it, but kind of happy to come together again. Let me run you through the lineup quickly. We had the Nova Twins, really brilliant London act, female-led. We had huge support in the crowd from young folks, not only from the borough, but that came to see them. They're absolutely brilliant. Don Letts, legendary activist, DJ, Six Music, Notting Hill Carnival, came and did a set. Ballymaya, a 16-piece instrumental band, jazz, West African influences. Joe Talbot, a lead singer of Idols, did a DJ set, which was absolutely brilliant. He kind of just drove up, came out with a bag of records, started to play, and everyone started dancing. Yolanda Brown, absolutely brilliant saxophonist from Barking's own. You might know her also from CBeebies. So she had a huge following of both young kids and jazz fans in the audience. And then the headline on the Saturday was Frank Turner, who we have a real affection for in the borough. He's kind of has huge ties to Billy Bragg, who's from Barking, and has a kind of activist kind of theme running through his music, which local people are huge fans of. On the Sunday, we ran the Roundhouse Music Festival. So the Roundhouse is one of the last remaining original pubs and kind of community centers from the estate when it was built in the 20s and 30s, and it has a huge legendary lineup. So Queen, Elton John, who else? I'm trying to see if Primal Scream performed that. They didn't. Who else was there? Led Zeppelin, etc. I think also some of the individual members of the Rolling Stones also performed there. So there's a huge legacy to this pub, and we were trying to bring back that kind of era of music. So it was headlined by the Boomtown Rats. It seems a bit odd because they wouldn't have performed there, but Bob Geldof, his dad worked at Dagenham Ford, so throughout his set they were talking about his own experiences of being in Dagenham, which was hugely significant to people. Neville Staple, the original Rude Boy from The Specials, performed a special set, and then the Status Quo had performed at the Roundhouse before, so we brought back John Coughlan, who's still touring with Quo. I won't get into the logistics, but it was a bit of a nightmare. We were, this was an August weekend, the last before the kind of pandemic aspects of COVID restrictions were were released. So we had a vaccination tent. We had people tested on the way in. We had over 200 people vaccinated on site each day. So it was quite a huge feat of logistics. And we're quite a small team. Our events team is 3 folks. So it was a real pulling together of the community to run things properly and safely. And here are just a few photos. So Tina, another rate of 6 Music, as well as some foster kids who did a procession to open the festival. We had some local carnival performers kind of perform to bring some of the performers onto the stage. We had some panels with Love Music, Hate Racism. There are a couple of our local councillors talking about their own activist roots with Love Music, Hate Racism. Some of our vaccinators before the site opened. We also brought back some kind of historic performance aspects. So originally the park, Parcels Park, where on the estate where the festival took place, there used to be horse races there in the late Victorian period. So we brought back some elements of that. Nova Twins performing, absolutely amazing. Yolanda Brown, the crowd just before Frank Turner got on stage. Sir Bob himself performing, and then of course some cute kids. What we have coming up, we want to continue working with music to bring people together. We've got a real diversity of people, folks that live in Barking and Dagenham, but they often stay within their own kind of communities, and we're trying to bring people together. So we're currently working towards a couple of key performances for the EFG London Jazz Festival. It's really exciting, and it's a beginning of hopefully a long relationship with them. And in the meantime, we've been running a couple of vocal sessions so that some young folks from the Borough would actually get to go on stage as part of the Jazz Festival, as well as some dance competitions in the lead up just to get young people involved in the festivals. I'm going to leave it there because I'm aware that I may have slightly run over, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Have I stopped sharing?
Thank you very much, Emily. Fantastic. I wasn't aware of the Dagenham Roundhouse before, despite coming from not far from that area and some of the fantastic artists that have played there. So it'd be great to see more of the heritage around that area and see who else has come from the area and performed there. It's good to see Frank Turner, obviously, is playing, because he does quite a lot with the Music Venues Trust, who we work a lot with, and he's a bit of a saint for them. And I know you said you had Idols play, which I saw Idols play in Bristol about 3 years ago. It's the loudest gig I've ever been to, and I suddenly realised I was getting a bit too old for those sorts of gigs. But we'll come back to yourself with some questions about the local authorities' role in the music industry and the music ecosystem and Regeneration in a bit. So what I want to do now is I want to start opening up some questions to our panelists. By the way, if anyone's tuning in and you want to ask some questions, do it in the chat, and then I will come back to them at the end, or I might throw them in the middle, depends on how we get on. So the first question, I'm going to start aiming this at Peter to begin with, but we can open it up if need be. What do you see the role of the music industry being in the town centre of the future?
Can I just say this is the most fun panel I've ever been on? It's just people talking about gigs. I mean, it's amazing. I love it. I'm after the great set by DJ West and DJ Peña. I'm kind of like somebody's dad who comes in at the end of a good party and switches the lights on and says, "Time to clear up and go home, guys." So sorry if I just bring the mood slightly grounded, slightly more. My background is finance and money and investment. I'm unashamedly going to bring us all back to that on a constant basis, just because I think it's the elephant in the room. It's the bit that really needs disrupting and talking about and shaping and reorganizing and rethinking. Just on your question, Jett, pretty simple question, pretty simple sentence. I'll take it each key phrase in reverse order. So the future, the thing of the future. I think the future's with us now. We've had so many compressed disruptions, let's extend it to say the last 5 years. So whether it's digitization of things that usually go on in a town centre, it used to be called retail, whether it's COVID, whether it's climate emergency, climate change, whether it's just generational change, the differences between preferences of Zs over millennials and Xs, etc. That's been normally pans out, I think, over maybe 15, 20 years. Well, we've had the whole lot come down the tube pretty quickly. So I think the visible nature of those trends mean we can see what the immediate issues to address might be about this change in this sort of future sort of piece. And I'm weaving in your town centre kind of notion, which is just a kind of big physical 3D set of spaces and places where people do stuff. And that stuff kind of used to be dominated for 2 generations by the dreaded shopping. I mean, I go back to the opening presentation this morning from Wayne Hemingway, who's always super entertaining, but he said, shop till you drop. Do you remember that in the 80s? That was meant to be fun. That was meant to be experiential and something you strove to do, and you went into your town to do that. And now it's probably the worst possible thing you could probably say to anybody. Certainly, if you say it to anybody under the age of probably 35, they'll turn around and walk away from you at that moment. So that's gone, and I think that's been a dramatic and serious change to the economic stability of these places and spaces, because previously, like it or not, that was quite a strong glue that held capital investment in place, which also meant other things could go on and flourish that perhaps didn't have to contribute as directly to the economic piece. And if you take that away dramatically, then it's left a lot of owners and investors, such as myself and people like me, and the businesses that I work for, similar ones to us, scratching their heads and actually, not to put it too bluntly, running for the hills. So long-term, patient, old-school capital, pension funds, insurance companies, have turned about face and are deserting town centres in terms of new ideas. They're stuck with legacy in terms of new opportunities to invest in this future, these things that we've identified and that we're surfacing. They don't have the vision or the belief to really get on board. And that's, to me, the big challenge, but also the fantastic opportunity. So where does kind of music fit within that? And I'm the things you didn't mention was I stupidly have a record label, studios, and I've been a promoter of bands and stuff in the past. So I kind of understand a little bit about what happens down at the sort of the grassroots end of things. And a complete fan of thinking of this part of the creative industries as a business ecosystem. It's actually, the UK music industry is GVA of 150 billion, let's say. So it's a seriously large part of our industrial base, of our work base, of our business base. So why on earth wouldn't that have a role in a town centre? Why on earth, as an investor, would you not want to embrace part of that ecosystem? Whether it's at the performance end, whether it's the management end, whether it's at the graphic end, whether it's at the technological end, whether it's at digitization, whatever part of it that you can get your hands on or bring into your places and spaces, and then work that ecosystem and get the sort of concentric rings of ripple effect of other things. I think it's a fabulous and powerful motivator to reach out and embrace. 200,000 people work in the UK music industry. That's more than Sainsbury's and Morrison's combined, for example. So in terms of chasing brands, then maybe with my property hat on, I think that's an easy win. But actually, there's way more benefit to come if I can find a way of getting my capital, my business's capital, my investors' capital, others' capital, to see a return on that can be valued. And I'd use that. I was doing that low down, valued. So, and that's probably measured in some ways, and that's been the difficulty, in that Mr. Investor only has one tool in his toolbox, and it's called Mr. Spreadsheet. And if it can't go on the spreadsheet, you can't really rely on it as part of your metrics to decide whether you invest and what you do and don't encourage or invest in. That's going to change, I'm absolutely sure. Impact investing and ESG, all sorts of things. I know you'll come and talk about this in a bit, Jett. They are going to produce methodologies that allow us to bring that into the equation too. So job creation, social cohesion, happiness, for heaven's sake. But all the things that don't fit in now, which the built environment can support and deliver on. I think those are the things. Great piece of work recently by the Creative Lands Trust. Just named Chet Gordon, who's your man there, if you're interested in what they do. Great organisation, doing super interesting things. Released a report last month with the help of Data Loft. Sandra's your contact there if you want to go and check out those data scientist guys, because they're really getting there down the nettles of measuring real estate, which measures uplift in value from having a creative hub, whether it's music, whether it's visual arts, whether it's performance of some form, within a mixed-use development scheme. And over a 10-year period, it averaged out at north of 4% per annum above the performance of that neighbourhood without the creative hub there. So you can actually tangibly, guess what? 4% is something I can put in the spreadsheet. It's a kind of thing, it goes in a cell and it helps the numbers work out. So I think work like that, and more people, I know Sound Diplomacy are about to do some important work on ESG, for example, and how music and that relates to adding value. I think it'll be super helpful for the capital investment that struggles to understand how it looks at the risk of, let's say, Hannah's brilliant work at Brixton, meanwhile use. Well, that's permanent. That's not meanwhile. That's really great. It's fantastic. It generates all sorts of values and revenue. So we just need to grapple a bit hard on my side of the fence. I think the learning needs to come on the real estate investor side more than anywhere else. And that's to me where if there's a problem to solve here, it's more to do with us than it is to do with the other great panelists.
Thank you, Peter. I think some really interesting points you've made there. I think from our experience that we've seen at Sound Diplomacy as well is, one, the real estate world has perhaps not understood the value of music and the music ecosystem and what they bring, but vice versa, the music ecosystem has also been quite bad at saying why they are valuable to society, to real estate, to property, etc. So I think there's a little bit of going both ways there. I think David mentioned, obviously, the guys like Broadwick Live and people like that. I think they've done quite a good job of being able to demonstrate why they are beneficial and why people should have them in there, for British land and places like that. I think they've done a good job of that. I think others are yet to catch up, perhaps. But we're going to change slightly. I'm going to come to Hannah now. And Hannah, if you can, perhaps with this question, explain a little bit about Make It London and what you do. So the question is, how does Make It London's model support embedding music and the creative industry in places?
So essentially our kind of primary business model is to be an affordable creative workspace provider for SMEs. But that we like to do things, I suppose, a little bit differently. I come from an events and music background. My business partners also do, and we really see the value in providing additional spaces to businesses. So not just private studios or offices or desk spaces, but what happens when you put those people in an environment where there's a shared recording studio, a shared photography and film studio, a performance space, an event space for them to actually start facilitating their work. So we're certainly workspace providers by kind of primary nature, but I like to think of us as more kind of cultural space providers, and this mix of hybrid, private and publicly accessible spaces. I think, obviously we don't just specialize in music, but we specialize in creative SMEs. And I think the critical thing to think about in that is that there's so much collaboration that happens between the creative industries. A musician 9 times out of 10 is eventually going to want to find a videographer to make them a music video. A homeware brand is going to want to find a photographer to photograph their products. An audiovisual artist is going to want to find a music producer to work with on their side of things. So really what we're trying to do at Make It London is not only provide affordable space for creatives, but put loads of people under one umbrella so that they can really start to form these organic relationships with one another. I think where we come from in the kind of affordability scale is that there are a lot of wonderful bedroom producers, really small musicians, and they really need the opportunity, if you like, to take that next step into a more professional environment. But perhaps they're not quite ready to be renting really expensive studios in central London. So we try and really bridge that gap, I suppose, and in turn try to encourage grassroots development of creativity. And I think for somebody like Make It, we're just about to reimagine Roycroft House in Barking. And I think it's so exciting post-pandemic what's happening to kind of Greater London or boroughs that are not so central. For so many years, we've been so used to seeing all of these cultural institutions, clubs, live music venues, music studios, recording studios, they've all been based in central areas. And obviously a lot of bad things to say about the pandemic, but I actually feel really excited for those boroughs and those areas who are now finally getting some investment put in and some attention, because people don't need to be travelling into central London anymore. And that's so important for young people, creative people who live in those areas, because they've kind of been left behind. It's like you've got to go and live in the big city if you want to make it and be a musician, be an artist. And I really see that changing now. And we're absolutely here to kind of support that and really feed into this 15-minute city type scenario by providing loads of different facility spaces. Over what we're doing in Barking next year is we're having maker space, creative space, office space, a photography studio, a recording studio, a bar, a cafe, a kitchen, outdoor space. And the idea really is to give all of these young people and young businesses, and that doesn't necessarily have to be young people in age, but young businesses, an opportunity to create a community, organic collaboration, and that's really exciting. And then we give them a platform to actually go ahead and showcase their work as well. I really loved what David referenced about communities and what music does for communities. I come from, and I spent my 20s raving in nightclubs, and that community that you feel because of that, the friends that you make, the jobs that you go on to do, the careers that you go on to have, that's via these kind of cultural institutions. And if we can embed some of that cultural institution into a supportive business platform for young people and small businesses, then that's how I see kind of Make It coming in to support the creative industries in town centres and cities.
Can I ask you a quick question, Hannah? So we sometimes you get this quite a lot with people say, "Oh, I have this site. What would you like to do with it? Who can you fill with it?" What's the process for finding these people to fill it and actually find the creatives and the small SMEs? How do you go about finding those people in the local area?
So we do lots of initial community engagement when we start a project in areas. So we'll do workshops, we'll give people tours of buildings, we'll reach out, Barking and Dagenham Council, for example, are being incredibly helpful and useful for us at the moment, connecting us to lots of community organisations, grassroots, arts clubs, music clubs. And then we go out as well into the colleges and the universities and try and really kind of grab the attention of those upcoming entrepreneurs. And I think what's wonderful about the collaborative nature of something like Make It is that eventually it becomes organic and it just becomes word of mouth. Here in our building in Borough, I would say that 70% of our resident businesses have come in because they know somebody else. And if you create an environment where people feel comfortable, everybody's a bit like them, they're all working in similar industries, before you know it, you've got this absolutely organic community of people. I'm not saying we don't have to do any marketing. Occasionally we do, and we certainly have to do when we start a new site and a new business, but fingers crossed, eventually it becomes really lovely and organic.
Thank you. I think my next question, I'm going to change what I was going to ask because you said something quite important there. Anne-Marie, if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask the next question. So the role of the local authority in championing music and cultural industries in the borough. So Hannah touched slightly on helping them find partners and people like that. But what other ways, aside from that, can the local authority help sort of champion a music ecosystem or a music industry in a local area?
Yeah, so I think we're in our particular case, Barking and Dagenham is per capita a really young borough. In fact, one of the youngest in the country and beyond. So I think one of the ways of championing a kind of rigorous ecology on the ground of cultural activity is to start working young, working in schools, but also in those in between hours. between school and going home. What we've been working really closely with quite a few organizations that work with young people, Studio 3 Arts. They have actually in the town centre a new facility that's currently being developed with editing suites, etc. In the culture service, we also have another branch called Newtown Culture. So we've got curators and artists working with social workers to work with the most vulnerable kids and children's services, from youth offending services to foster kids to unaccompanied minors who come into the UK. And working through culture, it allows us, or with artistic interventions, it allows us to build relationships with people through other means. It's not just about form filling when people are at the most vulnerable stages or in vulnerable moments in their lives. So we find culture broadly, but music definitely as part of that ecology, a really rigorous tool to be using to develop relationship-based practice, to have more vibrant communities, and as a way of being able to relate to people after they've experienced really difficult times in their lives as well.
Fantastic.
I don't know if that answers the question, but that's part of our thinking and the rationale for, I'm just looking at the Q&A also, justifying time spent on encouraging cultural activity. For us, it's all about developing relationships, developing communities.
Yeah, can I chip in for a sec there as well? Just to big up the Borough of Barking and Dagenham generally. I mean, I think there's a pretty simple phrase here, they get it. I mean, the leadership gets it. They get that added value bit that I was saying isn't in the spreadsheet. So you had a nodding, great, I've said something right. Phew. I think they do get it. And how do they help? Again, they're using their building, their own Roycroft House. They could have sold it for development. They could have knocked it down and got a handsome capital receipt for doing that. They also know, and no disrespect to Hannah or anyone as brilliant as her business is, no commercial developer would new build and invite Hannah in to start from scratch. The returns just wouldn't be there. So LBBD have helped by making a direct financial investment in getting that project going, because they believe they'll see rewards in other ways. As Hannah said, the ecosystem that will be built and the enterprise that can spin from that and then can move on, the kind of incubatory part of this. I'm involved with an organization called the Rattle, who do a co-work startup thing as well, and in Tobacco Dock actually, again for people just in music and kind of tech nerds, basically. They won't be saying that because that's the kind of phrase that they like to call themselves as well. And the idea is you support, you mentor, you help people, you move them on. Now the big thing in music is there's no middle ground. You're either right at the bottom or you've been signed and there's lots of money behind you. So what they're trying to do with their model is actually we can fill a bit in the middle by raising some capital and actually then say to people who are about to step up, you don't now need to go and either sell yourself out to a major, there's only 3 majors, or continue a breadline. Why don't we create an investment vehicle where you get a small amount of capital, loads of mentoring and support for a very small share of anything you make in the future? And that's so that venture bridge model. You kind of see how something like Hannah's Roycroft model could surface people that could be somewhere else locally where there could be some funding where they could then take that and set themselves up as a proper SME in music or in part of the industry. That then might send them over to David and me, our project in Vicarage Field, where we've got a venue where we'd like to put them on, etc. So it does become a virtuous economic cycle. It takes a bit of vision and it takes some belief, and that's Mr. Spreadsheet coming along again saying, I can't put a number on that, mate. Vision and belief equals risk, and we town centre investors have become risk averse. So whilst there's lots of incredible energy and fabulous ideas and brilliant people and support networks like Anne-Marie's out there, at the moment we're still trying to bust through how do we get the embedded capital to recognise the risk and embrace that and take it on, particularly new schemes. I know David's going to jump in and say, oh, we're doing it as big as we. However, those, a bit like our Vicarage Field scheme, those are supported by the fact that we're creating a residential community as well. So there's great value in that. But it's how do you then share that across the whole piece to make a fabulous piece of new town that's sustainable and works for everybody. And that's my challenge.
I think it's fair to say that categorise you as perhaps an enlightened investor in the sector, Peter. Can I ask? Touched on, the reason we asked this is because, Hannah, the challenges you've had in securing space and investment in the past, they haven't been particularly easy, and you haven't always had, Barking and Dagenham wasn't the first place you tried, for example. There's others. So perhaps you want to touch on the challenges. So we know there's value in the music ecosystem. We've got someone from the music ecosystem in Hannah, but how did we get you to where you are now? What were the challenges you were facing to begin with?
So, I think the real challenge for us as a company, and just to kind of make it clear with investment, we've invested into all of our own projects. We've certainly had to borrow that money to start off with. But slowly but surely, if you can borrow a little bit to do your first site, then you're able to start expanding out into other sites. The main problem, and why it takes us quite a long time in between opening of sites, is because we have to find a property which is so far below market rent that so in order for us to be able to then pass that down to our resident businesses. We pride ourselves on being an affordable workspace provider. Affordable means affordable. It doesn't mean paying £45, £55 per square foot for your studio space. And what that means for us as a company who have overheads to cover is that A, we need to find somebody who's willing to give us exceptionally cheap rent. And B, it means that we need something that's got such a vast square footage that all those finances then balance out. So essentially, you're always looking for a council partner, because generally councils are going to be the only people who see any value in letting their properties to you for a really, really reasonable price, because we can enter into things like what we're doing in Barking, which is essentially a social value-led exchange type scenario where we can say, we're going to fill your building full of 200 creative SMEs. We're going to create however many amounts of jobs. We're going to put on however many cultural events. We're going to support arts, music, culture in the borough. We're going to bring new people to live in the borough by doing that, by creating exciting public spaces. But to find those opportunities and to find those councils who have that have the assets in the first place, that aren't being used, and they just happen to be in good locations, and they also have a team of people who are as forward and thinking as Barking and Dagenham Council. It's a slow process. It does not come along every day.
That would lead me to ask a question, Jett, but is this the right moment to ask my question?
Yeah, so by the way, Peter wants to steal this from me. He's got a question to ask everyone. He does this every time. Sorry, go on, Peter. I don't.
So over a cup of tea at lunchtime, I was just thinking, running something over, because Hannah just absolutely nailed it in lots of ways. About, she said, we invest in our business. We're prepared to invest and take some risks, because we're kind of an intermediary between one part of the ecosystem, and then you're the next part, because you aggregate some of that, and then there's bits above that aggregate beyond and beyond. And the problem with my side of it is we've got a couple of big capital aggregators in the real estate, commercial, new build, which is pension funds, insurance companies, and private wealth. And they aggregate lots of bits of retail money and then try and make decisions to get a return on it, but also not take too much risk. One great thing that learning from the destruction of the retail sector, physical retail sector, is the technology and the disaggregation of things out to lots of small pieces, Amazon's big because it's got lots of tiny transactions or whatever, disaggregated out. And I wondered if, this is purely theoretical, but if any of the panelists, how they would feel if let's say, we'll take Barking because it's the current example and it's the one we're talking about, but I think as you said, Jett, lots of town centres around the UK are going to have to be reinvented, rebuilt, if only for meeting net zero carbon criteria in terms of the built environment, for example, but lots of other reasons as well. So let's say we decide to democratise the ownership of the commercial piece. Let's say the residential, that's a market and you can make money out of that. But we democratise the commercial by saying, tell you what, how about 25,000 people invested £5,000? So it's a crowdfunding thing, but a crowdfunding like you've never thought of before. You crowdfund a town centre, a new build town centre, with a set of rules about maybe some platform rules about arts, about entrepreneurship, about climate, about education and opportunity, and about diversity or inclusivity. And you say those are our key principles, and the way we're going to reflect those is amongst the ownership group, the shareholder group, is your money comes in and it's professionally managed and it gets built out, but it's for purpose rather than profit. And what that does is create the plinth above which you build the resi, and that's where most of the money comes for doing all this. But you can do it via, there's a thing called NICO, which is a REIT, American urban REIT, where they're buying the bits of Echo Park because the creative community who are rent there make it look great, and that adds value for the wretched owners. So why not buy it off the wretched owners in the first place and then make it look great? And so share that amongst those who are creating it. I know it's a little bit abstract, that example, but it's a REIT. It's raising hundreds of millions of dollars to do just that, but to disaggregate the ownership away so people can decide how the environment is and then vote on whether you want loads of startups in there. You don't have to worry, Hannah, about having an affordable rent. It's already written into the plan. That rent of that new build part will be that. It'll be subsidized by other parts in the equation. But it's only the power of a different mindset about the capital and the risk and the return. So, would you put £5,000 in? If I said, I'm going to rebuild Barking Town Centre, part of your pension, £5,000, the return will be maybe 2% for the first 3 years, growing to 5% at year 5, and then maybe 10% at year 10, and then you can sell out or stay in. Does that sort of sound at all a way of busting this crazy world, or where I have to keep going to ask an insurance company, do you believe in the vision of growing vegetables on my roof at Barking, for example?
Sounds quite idealistic. If you don't mind, I'm going to throw it to David first of all, because he hasn't. I haven't picked on him for a little bit. Whether you want to comment on what Peter's brainstorming and suggested here at a lunchtime coffee. Can you hear me, David? Yeah.
Well, obviously, I'm going to say it's a great idea because we should do it. We'll do it at Vicarage Field, which I completely inappropriately didn't get to because my Zoom decided to just chop me out for a second there. I think we would all acknowledge that the 21st century town centre, the 21st century metropolitan centre, has to have something different at its heart. And to many people, the binding factor, the viable factor is residential accommodation, and to a certain extent workspace accommodation, because we're all looking and working slightly more loose arrangements than maybe previous. But those two ingredients on their own don't make the town centre the full cultural offering, the full kind of mix or multicultural platform. And I think more and more designers are being challenged, and therefore developers are being challenged, designers are being challenged to try and find a solution to what a mixed-use environment can be that truly invites in its surrounding neighbourhood, its surrounding community, truly empowers people to have their best chances and to have their best, most memorable experiences. And so I think anything that can underpin and notionally give a business plan that could be sustained, that would release that type of genuinely polyvalent, genuinely flexible space within the heart of a big mixed-use scheme has to be a good thing. It's almost inevitable that has to happen in some way, shape or form, because who else is going to do it? The cash-strapped local authority or the terribly concerned about viability, understandably concerned about viability, private investor, developer. So there has to be a kind of a third way. In our studio, we've got half a dozen transformational projects on at the moment, and numerous of them have that super flexible multicultural platform within the mix. But how and when we actually bring that forward kind of is the challenging question, which I think Peter's throwing out to us.
Thanks, David. I'm going to stay on you for a second, if that's okay, because all of the big sites that you've talked about all have music within them. And at the moment, the big topic that I seem to be hearing on all the webinars that I watch is about ESG investment and ESG within property. And I was wondering if there's been a link between the music that you're doing and ESG criteria. Have you had to say, oh, music provides the social, or we're doing music in a sustainable way, or fair play schemes for artists is a good governance model, something like that? Has music been used in ESG criteria at all for you?
Is that a question for me?
Sorry, David, that's still for you. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think it's and it's interesting that you raise it. Yeah, I was surprised and delighted to be invited to join this seminar, mainly because of the connection between our work for Peter at Vicarage Field in Barking. And Barking is an amazing borough, doing amazing things, and we truly love Barking, and super excited about Vicarage Field. But the reason why I was so excited by the challenge of your topic was, for me, I suddenly could see kind of all these amazing links, which I could enthusiastically start to see connecting basically 25 years of work in my case. And to me, it just sparked, this afternoon has completely sparked a kind of a question I have in my head about the sense of the temporal, the sense of the serendipitous, the sense of that open-minded nature of almost the feeling we get when we go to festivals, and that incredible kind of collective shared memories, and why so much of our city planning and way of delivering cities in terms of economic systems and financial systems, delivery mechanisms, is kind of so against that fundamental, fluid, organic, I think Hannah said, nature of festivals, where in a way it's obvious that that's the thing that can kind of draw so many people together in such rich and diverse ways. So no, the ESG criteria has not in any way been taken as a kind of an absolute requirement or fed into our thinking as placemakers. But I think that kind of maybe the reason why our studio has been invited to join these sorts of projects is maybe because our mindset of the studio and people that work in the studio, the people who work with the studio, is very, very open and very, very enthusiastic about the spontaneous, the serendipitous, the kind of journeying of placemaking, rather than a fixed and the master plan and mandate. And so, yeah, I can't quite answer your question, sorry.
So I chip in if I may really quickly, Jett, opening that time, I'm sure. Yes, it's massive in the capital side. So in the capital markets, there's investment, ESG, SDGs, etc. I guess, lip service-ish, but it's starting to become something that's now properly measured, and investors and the money behind the investors are looking for your criteria, which is why I opened up and said, I do see some light on the horizon about impact investing, social values, working their way into the wretched, I'll say it one last time, spreadsheet. I promise I'll never say that word again. But I think those are the things that are going to help get the sustainable long-term patience capital into some of these more vibrant opportunities, which require perhaps a greater degree of supervision management experience than investors are used to having been that close to. They're used to saying, oh, I've signed a lease with Marks and Spencer's for 25 years. I won't have to do a thing now for 25 years. They'll just send me money. It actually was as simple and as moronic as that. But that's not the way anymore. So I think the fact that we can bring in these measures and anything that allows us to look at total return across a number of different sort of pillars, as well as economic metrics, has got to be fantastic to help the creative industry, kind of voice what it's worth in a better way. To your point about the communication thing as well, and appreciating. I almost got booed off a stage in Berlin, I think, with your founder Shane, because I said, you don't realize the value you guys have. It's all about gentrification and people in Berlin getting forced out. But I say, you need to find a way of enhancing that and articulating it and be part of the debate and say, we're bringing value here, guys. Let's have that as part of the equation.
I have to stop you there, Peter, because I'm getting I'm getting a warning. The reason I wanted to ask the ESG question, I'm due to write an article about it, and I was hoping one of you could tell me the answer and I could just take it away, but we nearly got there, so maybe I'll pick your brains again. Cool. I think that's just about wraps up our webinar for today. I just want to thank Peter, Hannah, Anne-Marie and David for joining us, and thank you again for the presentations. And I'll hand over now to Bonnie of Regeneration.
Thanks, Jett. Very great summing up there at the end. And thank you so much to our panel for a really great discussion, a really enthusiastic end to the day, and especially enjoyed the guest appearance from Mr. Plummer. Hopefully he knows that he's now being part of the event. But yeah, it was a really great topic, and yeah, definitely something we'd like to talk about more as part of Real Estate Live. And it could have definitely carried on until this evening. So thank you very much to Vicarage Field and Sound Diplomacy for bringing the session to us today, and again to the panel. And just a quick note to the audience and indeed the panel, if you'd like to turn up for any of our sessions tomorrow, just to let you know that we have our wellness keynote taking place first thing tomorrow. Then we have another fantastic session from another London borough. So if that's something you're interested in, we've got Waltham Forest joining us tomorrow morning, talking about inclusive growth and building out of the pandemic, with a few different speakers from the council and some of their private sector partners. And then to finish off the last day of Real Estate Live UK this time around, we have the second of our wellbeing breaks in partnership with Therma Group. So if you want to take 15 minutes out from the frantic keyboard world to stretch, breathe and focus on your health, then please do join that session just for 15 minutes of a time out with Therma Group. So thank you very much for joining us for this session, and we look forward to seeing you again hopefully tomorrow. See you soon.